My name is Jeannie Namitz. I am the Director of Religious Education. Imagine a journey through New Jersey to places connected with the Underground Railroad. Just what was the Underground Railroad? Well, children, it was not a physical railroad, but what it was a network providing assistance to people seeking freedom from slavery more than 160 years ago. These freedom seekers were helped most often by naturally sympathetic free Blacks, as well as by whites, church people, political abolitionists, men and women, as they traveled to freedom any way they could. Over the next few weeks, we will visit 9 places in New Jersey and hear the stories of people and organizations, both Black and white. Some were helpers, and others caused harm to those freedom seekers. This initiative is part of our own journey towards reckoning with history and racial justice, and brings it close to home by focusing on our own state and involving our entire congregation. Besides the telling of these 9 stories, we will be exploring a meta story that as people of faith and justice, we must bring forward. As a predominantly white cultured congregation, we recognize that these stories are not our own. And so we are charged with the responsibility to tell them with great reverence and care. The Unitarian Universalist minister, Marjorie Bowens Wheatley, wrote, "Our first task in approaching another people, another culture, is to take off our shoes, for the place we are approaching is holy. Else we find ourselves treading on another's dream. More serious still, we may forget that God was there before our arrival." Faith communities have welcomed refugees into their safe havens from the beginning of the Old Testament. Cities of refuge to the times of slavery and the Underground Railroad, to the draft during the Vietnam War. Today, we will hear the story of Lawnside, formerly known as Snow Hill and Free Haven, a community of mostly free Black persons that welcomed freedom seekers with a safe stopover on the Underground Railroad. So today, as we approach what is holy in the telling of these stories, we invite you to listen with your heart.
Our introduction to the Underground Railroad comes from the Burlington County Underground Railroad Museum.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. Over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
A lot of South Jersey is actually below the Mason-Dixon line, extended here in red. and in my mind it always seemed part of the Old South. But through this project, I'm changing my view of my home state. It turns out North Jersey enslaved far more blacks than South Jersey, and fought legal attempts at emancipation, so that only the 13th Amendment freed our last few black slaves, almost 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Back in 1820, South Jersey's black population was 96% free. In North Jersey, almost half were enslaved. Our state's economic interests entwined with the southern states, and New Jersey voted against Abraham Lincoln both times he ran for president. So it was in southern Jersey that free and independent black communities developed. Our first stop in this journey is a small community in Camden County, the borough called Lawnside. I first heard about it in the WPA New Jersey Guidebook, which reported, since incorporation in 1926, Lawnside has had Negro officials exclusively, from mayor to dog catcher. Its 155 white residents have left the town management exclusively in the hands of their 1,224 Negro neighbors. Stores are almost exclusively owned and operated by Negroes, but 2 chain groceries employ Negro clerks under white managers. What is now Lawnside was settled by people of African descent beginning in the 1700s. Both free blacks and those who escaped enslavement were drawn to the community. Known as Free Haven and later Snow Hill, it was one of the historic black towns of New Jersey that served like the biblical cities of refuge. As we shall see in coming weeks, these communities welcomed and protected refugees into their safe havens. The first notices of Snow Hill in newspapers describe a religious camp meeting in 1820 and the formation in 1837 of the Snow Hill and Mount Zion Anti-Slavery Society. One of the noted early residents of Snow Hill was Jarena Lee, the first woman authorized to preach in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. In 1836, she was the first black woman to have an autobiography published in the U.S. A generation after Jarena Lee, the town's connection to the Underground Railroad was established through another black preacher, Peter Mott. Reverend Mott and his wife Elizabeth Ann were leaders in the Mount Pisgah African Methodist Episcopal Church, within what was then called Snow Hill. Built in 1845, his house was a station on the Underground Railroad and now houses a museum that welcomes visitors interested in learning more about black history. Sometime when you're headed south on the New Jersey Turnpike, get off at exit 4 and get to know Lawnside. Now Kristen Plumley will help us to locate this first stop on our journey. Kristen?
Good morning, everyone. I am here to help us locate the towns that we will be discussing each week. Here is our map of New Jersey, and you at home were sent a link in the blast this week for a printable map. Does everybody have their map? I see Jeannie's holding hers up. Great. So we're going to start with just some reference points. Here's Trenton, our capital. Newark and Ridgewood is right up here. Today, I'm going to take our little marker and place it on Lawnside. And I invite all of you at home to mark your maps with an X or an O or whatever you want to mark it with, color it in. There we have our first stop on the Underground Railroad.